Well, hey there, Colette. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so excited that you're here and to share you with our audience and talk about some incredible opportunities for nervous system regulation and manifesting and so many good things. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Sure. So why am I here on a podcast about a confident, sober women? Okay. So I can tell you that 40 years ago is when I got clean and sober, January 2nd, 1986. So I've had 40 years to learn what all of that actually means and to evolve into the person I am today. But I think I just want to give you a bit of qualifying. So my relationship with alcohol, because we're talking about sobriety, alcohol and drugs. So when I was 12, my parents were Europeans and we had alcohol in the house. It was normal. And I had my very first drink called Slivovitz, which was a plum brandy because my dad was Serbian and it came from Yugoslavia, which isn't called that anymore. But anyway, and I felt like a whole person for the first time in my tiny little life. Like to me, it was like, what is this magic? Right. Whereas my friend would be spitting it out, going, ew, what is that? Right. I'd be like, oh, we want some more of that. So immediately I wanted another one. Immediately I felt different. Immediately that opened the biggest can of worms. But I just want to say this that we talk about, I mean, I've been sober a really long time. And I'm like old school sobriety where we didn't have internet. You know what I mean? We would go to meetings in person and we'd smoke in them and, like that kind of thing. We had phone calls but not much has changed other than the fact that our attention has been hijacked and our nervous systems have been hijacked in our modern world. So staying sober today, and when I talk about sobriety, is different than staying sober back then because your attention is split in so many directions right now. And so I really acknowledge it for people who are not so long in the tooth like I am. I'm an old timer now, but it is not easy. And this is something you have to commit to. So and you have to hit bottom too, and you have to admit it. So I went on my merry way with alcohol and drugs. I went to a private school. So I can't blame my parents. Even though alcoholism and addiction of all kinds is in my dad's background, not so much my mom's, but she was a Holocaust survivor. So she had all this other stuff. So I was raised, believing I wasn't safe, right? Which was, I think that was environmental. But I just know I had the allergy. I was alcoholic before I had the alcohol. So, and it was because I think when I'm looking back at my childhood, I did not know where I ended and anybody else began. So the idea of the fact that I never felt solid in me and I didn't feel sewn together at all. And so alcohol was medicine for me. And when I drank, I felt like I belonged. I felt like I was smart. I felt like, right, it's just the way it was for me. Now, I got into trouble very early with it. But I think I just had all the mental health issues and the trouble before, and it mixed it together. So I'm going to say, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, and it doesn't matter. But I came into the program with a multitude of things that needed outside help, as well as the 12 steps. So I'm assuming that I can talk about 12 steps here because I know sobriety comes to people in lots of different ways. I'm a hardcore 12 stepper. And still am. And I still go to the meetings and at 7:30 in the morning every day. Right. So, but anyhow, so what happened to me was that other than my inhibitions going away, I had a lot of, my dad was 50 when I was born, and it was a culture that was very chauvinistic and not his fault. He was a terrific guy, terrific man. He was a fascinating person. And my mom was very much, our together with me. Like, so he went to work, came home and ate dinner, and then he would sit in his chair and we had to sit there and listen to him, that kind of thing. But I was rebellious, and I don't know if it was the alcoholism or maybe it was. I just know that from the earliest age, I was just a rebel. If you're going to say something was black, I'm going to say it was white. And I mean, I wanted to smoke outside the schoolyard. I was 9. You know what I mean? I was trouble waiting to happen. And I got into drinking with my friends. It was funny too, because my parents were like, "Oh, you have to hang around with good kids from these good private schools." And we were the worst ones, stealing our parents' Mercedes and, taking bottles of lemon gin. Ooh, gross, disgusting. And getting so drunk and puking all over the cars. Like that, like, oh, they're good kids from good homes, right? Because my mom thought we would catch poverty or something if we, and because they came to Canada with nothing and built up a life that of privilege for us, right? Anyway, so quickly, I was just a mess. Got into university, was very smart. My parents just decided I would be a lawyer, and I went along with it. But all I ever wanted to be was a singer-songwriter. And now law school, so I took an overdose before the day before exams. So law school ended for me. And then I went through a series of ways in which maybe this would work, maybe this would make me better, maybe that. And I never thought it was the alcohol or the drugs. It was because my life was like this, because my parents were like this, because my story was this. You had that, you drink too. But the truth was, I was an addict and I was an alcoholic and I could not stop and I couldn't see it. And the denial was so strong in me. I don't know how open we can be on your show. You can, but I'm going to be anyway. So when I went to university, I had to make up. I wanted to make up the year, so I went to another university. And the bottom line is, I hooked up with the wrong people. I worked at a bar, and I ended up getting beat up and then gang raped, and then after that, I didn't tell my parents until I ended up with a severe, again, drinking, drugging. It was all the drugs and the drinking. I would never have gone had I not been drunk. And I would never have been attracted to people like this. So I was very attracted to dark elements, right? Like, give me the criminals and whatever, I'll show my parents, right? I worked at a strip club, like, oh my God, my parents would die. But that's what I did, right? I did all the things. Anyway, I went to a treatment center in 1980, didn't stay sober, did not surrender, didn't understand the surrender, just wanted to talk about how do I get out of this. And of course, I took Bailey's. I thought milk would help. I'm not an alcoholic. I haven't had a drink in 9 months. I think I'll have some milk in my drink. And then 5 years later, I had a severe cocaine habit. This was in the 80s, right? When we were told it wasn't addictive. But I was out there partying and I was with somebody who was a producer and also a sex addict. And, I got into the music and all whatever. And then I just hit bottom. I couldn't do it anymore. So so I always say that I took the express train into the program because I took that drug and I got into trouble with that drug. And I'm grateful because I was 20, 1986, January 2nd, 1986 is my dry date. And so what was I, 27, 28? Yeah, 1958. Yeah, something like that. Right at my Saturn return, if you know anything about astrology. So what happened after that is really what's most important, because it wasn't just about, I went to another treatment center for women and I was able to talk about some things in there. We were women, there were 35 women. It was it was a Jean Tweed treatment center. I was the first client in the door. And I remember going there and saying, oh, AA doesn't work, because I had gone before. I was like, forget that. So I'm not going to go to AA, but I need to deep, I need to sleep. So I will come. And they're like, you need to be an inpatient, right? They had an outpatient program and initiation. And it was all 12 steps. It was all AA. Thank God. They just went, great. You just come on in, right? Oh, it saved my life. So we went to meetings and we did the first 4 steps in that 28-day program. And of course, I went back and did them again from scratch. But what it did also, it has enabled me to recognize that I wasn't junk and that I had that all the shame, because I was so riddled with shame, I became a different person. Obviously, that shadow self, the self-hatred, because I continued to attract men who were violent, sexual violence in my 20s. After that had happened, I just repeated those things, and like it's like doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result, that maybe that would fix it. And of course, it just got worse. So I mean, I'm not even going to go into it. It was so disgusting. And I really could see today, looking back, my part in those things, but all I could feel was shame and that I was a mistake and that I should die. Right. But there was a part of me that didn't want to die. So thank God. I hit my bottom in a drug dealer's basement. I had drank and smoked coke and whatever, but over a week, and I just saw myself truthfully in the mirror for the first time, and I said, "Help me." And so help came, but help came to start, right? So you start by stopping, right? And I lost the compulsion to use and drink. It was lifted from me. After that, walking at that morning when I left, I never had the compulsion to pick up a drink or a drug ever again. So the work starts here then. So sobriety became my life. So basically, I grew up in recovery, right? So I'm going to be 68 this summer. And my whole life has been about that. Like and what is recovery? So for me, recovery is the evolution of the self, right? That it's continuous peeling of the onion skins. It's about being as honest as I can at any given time, because sometimes I could not have self-honesty. I was 60 years old when I finally looked at all the sexual violence. I was 60 when I did all this EMDR treatment, because I realized that there's something in me that's something there. And thank God I have a normal husband, normal marriage, and with a normal, like, he doesn't drink or whatever. He used to party, but we were both in the music business. So he was in a band. So he's a pretty cool, hip guy. But like, in terms of, we had a great sex life, everything was great, but I knew that there was something in me that needed healing. And it took that long. So, right, that's like 8 years ago, right? So I was 32 years sober before I could actually deal with some of the stuff that happened. And when I was molested when I was a baby, like all kinds of stuff. But I found that I could create a life, and it was service that did it. Like, I went in there. Oh my God, my first sponsor, she was like Aunt Clara from Bewitched. She would like repeat herself. She was like this dotty old lady who'd like, you'd see her. I don't know if you ever saw that show, but maybe you're too young. But she was a great character, and she was just the most loving person. And my mom was not that way. She was very critical, but she was also just scared for me all the time. I understood. I understand her so well today, and I know how much she loved me. But it was impossible. I was an impossible child. I mean, my parents could never have done anything at all. So I needed somebody to just love me. And she just called me her exotic bird, because at the time, if you can see this, I was walking around with studded brassieres on and big thigh boots with big spiky heels, leather leg warmers with seriously, I look like Elvira. I had the spiky hair with the long, I looked outrageous. And that's how I marched into the AA meeting. And they were like, whoa, we got a live one here. And I remember when this guy was 5 years sober, and he talked from the stage, we were in my group, and he said, I just want to shout out to Colette, because I was going to kill myself the day I walked into a meeting and I saw this wild looking woman at the door going, well, if she can be sober, I can. Like, because I freaked people out, but they did not say anything. They did not say anything. I was just this wild goth maniac, right, person. But I took to it like a duck to water. Like, how they say that you hold on to it like a life preserver. So I did things. I cleaned up. I went and I put out the ashtrays. I put out the chairs. I made the shitty coffee. I'd go get the bad birthday cakes that we would get from that, right? Were made out of lard and sugar and whatever. And I'd get high as a kite on that, because I'm also a sugar addict, right? But whatever, one thing at a time. So, and I became a different person. And my life, it's like so interesting, because it took me a while. It was organic. It wasn't, I just did the same things. I went to meetings. I called my sponsor. I sponsored people. I did the steps. I had therapy. I did what it took, but I couldn't do it all at once. Right. So I had an eating disorder that took its roots in me once I got sober. And I had to deal with that. Then my parents died back to back when I was 31 and 32 or something. And then that happened. So there was I wasn't sober a long time, and and I had to deal with all of these things. And I remember also, I'm going to say this, I had not a pot to piss in. Okay. Like my parents were poor as church mice, when they both died and stuff. And I had gone off on my own, and I was making a living as an artist for a period of time, painting on people's clothes and stuff, and doing some, telemarketing. And I'm not really sure how clean that was, but it was clean enough. It was for the Liver Foundation. I don't know if they got all the money, but whatever. It felt right. It felt okay to me. But and I remember thinking I was the wealthiest person on the planet because I didn't wake up in anxiety. I didn't wake up hating myself, even though I still smoked cigarettes, which I quit too when I was 35. But it was like I had value in my life that I never could say before, even though I didn't have anything materially at all. Like at all. I was living hand to mouth and I was so happy, and I wasn't so haunted by my past. That came later in an interesting way because, as you get successful, life gets more complicated. The whole cash and prizes and who am I, and the ego, because the whole idea of recovery is ego deflation. Like in a way, in that the sublimation of the ego so the spiritual self can lead. But it's not possible for me 24/7. It doesn't work. I'm always dealing with the fact that I'm always going to be an alcoholic. And if I don't do the same things, and if I don't do those, commit to those one day at a time, my little cuckoo bird inside is going to tell me that I'm afraid, or that I should have that, or like, oh, a pie is good. That would help your anxiety. That's a good choice. Like stuff like that, where you're like, no, you're escaping again. So this has been an ongoing journey. And yes, I have had extreme financial success and career success. And, I got a record deal after failing forever. So I've had 2 albums on the EMI music label. I've been a Hay House author for 20 years. I've basically followed spirit's nudges. But I am constantly aware that I need to change. There is no such thing as I have arrived in recovery, or that there is a guarantee that I'm safe. And that took a long time. I got very arrogant and when I was like around, I don't know, 5 or 6 years sober, and I would listen to people 30 years sober, and they were struggling, and they were talking about their struggles. I'm like, well, they have terrible programs. I don't want to go near them. Right. Because I judged people. I got really, I've made it now. And it wasn't true. And so what I have seen over time is those slogans that they say, like live and let live and keep it simple. And, when I'm judging somebody, one finger's out there, 3 are pointing back at me, all of these kind of euphemisms that we have. I think that's a word. I'm not sure. Some isms, wordisms, that we use in 12-step programs. And, and I also became very involved in Cocaine Anonymous in Toronto. Me and 2 guys, we all hung out together, because really, if you look back at those times, we had a subculture, a social subculture. We were different than other drug addicts because, part of this, it was a social drug, and it was a lot of sexual acting out. And so, we had very specific experiences that only we understood each other. So me and these 2 guys that met in AA we got a starter kit from Montreal, and then we started CA in Toronto. I was only present to it for about 5 or 6 years. And then when my parents died, I had to go to a different program for eating disorders. And, I also realized that bleeding deacon thing, you got to turn it over, but it kept me clean. But what I told them all in there is like, you got to go to the mother program. You'll be successful in here if you go there. Right. And just hear it, because alcohol, drugs of any kind, it's the same thing. It's no different. It's just dressed up differently. Compulsion is compulsion. Doesn't matter what it is. You see people now. I just recently, because a friend of mine said the meetings were really good, went for a few times to, I think it's called not Internet Anonymous. Some program. I can't remember the name of it, but it's where people go that stay doom scrolling all day, that stay on the internet like 10 hours a day and stuff. And it was very, very amazing to hear how the same feeling of addiction towards social media, all of that, it's just as devastating. They lose their jobs, they lose their partners, they lose themselves, and they have shame, the same things, the same thing, and it doesn't matter what it is. And so what I've learned being in recovery is like, I could qualify every program. and I'm aware that at the core of being a confident, sober woman, I'm going to refer back to the name of your podcast. It's the willingness to be humble. Really important to not take yourself too seriously. I went back to meetings. So I was on the cover of Spirituality and Health magazine back in September. And I was going to meetings sporadically. I had a group of girlfriends who were sober a long time. And I was in Portugal for 3 months or 2 months, sorry. And then we were moving around all the place. So I wasn't going to any, except during the pandemic, I went online, but I didn't have a home group. I didn't have my core rootedness. And I looked at that magazine, and there I was plastered across a bookstore shelf, right eye level. And I went, how did you get there? And what does it even mean? And I got on the blower so fast, and I called around and said, okay, I need to start going to some meetings. And I took a friend of mine who just happened to show up and needed help, and started going to some meetings in Toronto. We got a condo there, literally, so I could go to meetings, and also have a, because we'd moved back to Canada, also to have a connection to my friends, but where I got sober, because that's where I first got sober. But then I ended up joining a group online that is in New York. And a lot of old timers mixed up with newcomers. So I love it because lots of people there are sober like I am long term. But I recommitted. I went to 90 and 90 meetings, and I go now. I just didn't stop. I thought, this is too much fun. I love it. And I was able to say to myself, I need this. Like, I can't do it without it. I cannot do this alone. I could have drank or done something stupid. I could have, like, all the things that I took for granted when I started going back to meetings. Now, again, keep an open mind. If you don't go to meetings and you found sobriety in a different way, all the power to you. I'm sharing my story. And if something in here resonates with you, great. And if it doesn't, I always say, take what you like and leave the rest. I might say one thing only that you like. That's good. But my journey has been about humility. And it's been about like, hey, I can't do this alone. And I had to really separate this persona, because, this persona, like, I was on the Dr. Phil show and a couple of times, and I was living in a small community in, where was it? New Hampshire, because we moved from Sedona to New Hampshire. We moved to the States for 10 years. And there were people there at this meeting. Oh, I saw you on TV and all this stuff. And then I started getting really like, well, wait, I'm not here. I have to be here for recovery. And then I started shying away from meetings. And I made it mean something. And now it doesn't mean anything. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm in there for my recovery. It doesn't matter what I do, because all of that's going to get taken away from me. Everything will be taken away if I pick up a drink. So if I stop going because my ego says, oh, I'm special and I need special treatment, and oh my God, you can't talk about, what, F that. Like, my success does not come from my career. My success comes from my spiritual recovery, my emotional recovery, a sense of feeling that I have a sense of being grounded, my practical spirituality. What I do, I can change hats with that, or faces or masks anytime. It just so happens, which has been helpful, is that all of the work I do is spiritually based. So, I threw myself into this world, and I came into it as an intuitive, but really it's about personal transformation. So everything that I do, everything I teach is really about that. Now, obviously and anybody that has bought my Oracle cards or read my books, you can tell I'm in the program, because I talk, everything I am today is because of that. I am nothing without that. I am absolutely nothing about. Yes, I'm the one that has to get up every morning and commit. But without that program, I'd be dead. I would be dead. I would, or in a mental hospital.
Mhm.
I suffer from everything, anxiety. I'm sure. Oh yeah, all the ADHD stuff. If there was some people that could tell my parents what was wrong with me, like I would have been on meds, right? Because I was Looney Tunes. But today that's called, they have names for that. You're on the spectrum, you're neurodivergent, you have ADHD, you have all these things, right? But we don't know what to call any of it except like, don't tell the neighbors.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't know if you want to add or talk about anything, but I know that as long as I am doing the do things that are important to recovery, and that means self-care, and that means learning to say no. And by the way, too, I am a recovered people pleaser. That has been the thing that has got me in worse trouble. I have the codependency part came out in spades, and I found that when I really reveled in being a sponsor. I think that was my ego too, but it kept me sober.
Mhm.
But it was like I could like share my experience. That was so important. Ugh, who was I kidding? Anyway,
Mm.
it didn't screw anybody up, but stop at you. Okay, sorry, my dog is
Mm.
needing. I should belong to Alapup, right?
Well, thank you so much, Colette, for sharing all that and such in-depth parts of your story. I really truly believe that this is how it works, right? I mean, I also got sober at around the same time that same age that you did.
Yeah,
I turned 27 in rehab, so I have been around kind of a while too. So that long-term recovery thing or phenomenon is like a real thing.
yeah,
And
it
I
is.
didn't really understand what that was either until probably a little bit recently. And then I was interviewing another woman who's a little bit more sober than me. I got sober in 2002. I think she was more like 1998 or something. And so she talked a lot about like long term, like that. She kept saying like that's like a long term recovery thing. And I didn't
Yeah,
understand it fully. But then when I started to listen to her and we were chatting, and I think about my life today, I so do embrace that concept. And it's not to diminish what anybody's doing, because of course, even one day sober, we should celebrate, because for many
no,
people,
no, I get
even
it.
staying sober one day is it has been impossible, so it's always amazing. And you're right. We do talk a lot about 12 step here because that's how I got sober as well. But we also really recognize
There are
however
so
anybody
many.
wants to get
Yeah,
sober, because obviously that is the point. If you have decided that substances are a problem in your life, then however you are using or whatever you're using to can be well is good.
correct.
And
And I believe
so,
that too.
mhm.
So I'm really happy that that's your, hang on, I got to put her down. On the floor there. Go ahead, Bizou. Just don't pee on the carpet. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I
So.
know that there's a lot of different paths to recovery, but recovery is about change. And I think that that's what I don't care how you get to it. When you are sober, that's just the start. Getting off the substances is not enough, because you're still left with all the wounds, all the stories, all the narratives, everything that's clung to you. And the identity that you had before is just you feel better and you're not drinking, or you're not drugging, or you're not doing whatever. But, if you really want to have the benefit, like sobriety is about a type of awakening of sorts, right? And it's never ends. It does give you some phases where, like, and I know that's a long term recovery thing where you have some periods of time where you focus on other things or whatever. But, at the moment for me, looking back over the time, I can see how I could have, like, I had a motorcycle accident, and I used to ride Harleys because I wanted to get over my fear of what had happened to me. So I thought I'm going to be the one on the big bike. But then I almost died on an accident. So that wasn't good. But I was prescribed Vicodin. I mean, they gave me morphine in the hospital because literally all the flesh was pulled off my leg. But afterwards, I was in terrible pain. So for pain management, but I'd call my sponsor every day and say, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a person that is committed to talk to you. So you have like an accountability person that you call, that person signs up to be that for you. So she's longer sober than me. Anyway, so then one day I woke up and I like didn't want to have my medication on the right time. I just wanted to have a cup of coffee, pop a pill, and call somebody. So I called her right away and said, I'm in trouble. So I didn't have a slip, thank God, but I could see what a slippery slope that was, and also how other people go back out on pain meds. And I'm like, and as soon as now something happens at the hospital, I tell them right away, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, I can't take any medication, that's mind altering. And I tell the dentist that, do not prescribe me Percocet, do not prescribe me this, don't give me this, or this, right? I don't care. I don't care.
Oh, oh
I'm not
yeah.
gonna, I'm not putting myself at risk for
Right.
nothing.
And you shouldn't. Like, we definitely need to be honest with our providers for sure. And you said a couple things that really stood out to me, and I can relate to as well. One of which was, we never arrive, and I say that very frequently as well. One thing that was said to me a long, long time ago was, that we're all under construction, and
Yeah, we are.
I firmly believe that.
Renovation. We're all being renovated
Yeah,
constant.
we don't ever really arrive in life until like really we die. Like I feel like
Yeah,
so I continue to want to be a lifelong learner just like you, where we are like growing and changing, and even as we're aging,
yeah,
I mean I'm not the I mean, I'm the expert in some things I'm the expert of my life. I'm an expert in
yeah,
some things in my work, but like I don't know everything, and I don't
yeah,
begin to think that I do, and I haven't certainly never been every place I could possibly go. And so there's so much to do and see still in life. And so kind of having that kind of open mind around, you know, we don't know it all. Like you mentioned about humility, that's a big part of my work in general as a therapist, and also in my life and as the parent of three now young adults. Humility is really necessary, and I honestly think that in many ways you kind of alluded to some of this, that this is a missing link, I think, in our world today, like in our
right.
society. I feel like that people really do not have a deep enough connection, I think, to the concept of humility and what that really means, like a
What it means.
falling on your knees,
Yeah,
surrender. Like, I am no better than you, than the
yeah.
guy under the
And I have
bridge,
no,
than the
and also
addict
self
who,
honesty.
yeah, like I'm no better than anyone else. I'm different. I have different privilege. I have different skill sets, but the inside parts of me are the same as yours. And like, I'm really no better than anybody. And
Yeah,
I think that kind of level of humility for me has come from a deep sense of spiritual connection as well.
yeah,
Like that spiritual
yeah,
connection over the last 10 years, specifically, even in 5 years, actually. Um, has grown me exponentially. It's been the spiritual process that's taken me from here to here
yeah,
in my life, and just I guess in recovery. And also, you talked a lot about, like, you said sobriety, um recovery is only the beginning. I always say constantly, like, sobriety is only the beginning. You
yeah.
know, like,
Well,
it just is. I mean,
abstinence is the beginning.
well, sobriety, yeah, meaning the
Yeah,
absence of
right. So,
substances, right? Substances,
yeah.
like I wrote a memoir back in 2001, and it's called Recovering in Recovery for that exact reason,
Oh, I
right?
love that. I have to read it.
Because yeah, it's very raw, real. It's all
Beautiful.
about recovering and recovery, right? Like you
Recovering
mentioned,
and
you grew up
recovery.
in
Love to read
recovery, and
it.
like I feel the same way. I was 27 when I turned 27
Yeah.
in rehab. I got pregnant 6 months after I got sober, and then I had three kids in 4 years, which I wouldn't recommend, but that's how it worked for me. And so I kind of had to do some backtracking, right? I had to grow up
Yeah.
backwards a little bit, kind of, because I was so focused on all this like mommy stuff and like whoa. And in year 4 I had my first sober bottom because I was really just overwhelmed and
Get
not
it.
doing all the things. But I'm also curious because you also mentioned that you did some EMDR work, which is the kind of therapy that I do in my practice and what I promote very heavily, because all the neurologically based forms of treatment to me are
You
the
do
most.
EMDR?
I do.
Oh, that's
And
great. Uh-huh.
yeah, and I just expanded my practice into a group. So my clinicians are EMDR trained. I do remote neurofeedback. We focus on somatic work because that we know is what is actually healing the brain. Not, I mean, traditional talk therapy is wonderful and it can be used for a lot of
No, no,
things.
I get it. It was good for me in the beginning, but it wasn't anymore.
I'm just
So
curious about
yeah.
I'm curious because it took you a long time. You mentioned it took a long time for you to get to that place where you wanted to do that work, or you thought it was necessary. I'm wondering what the change, like, how did you know, or why, what was the barrier for that? Or why did it take you
Um,
so long?
so I did all kinds of other therapy.
Hmm.
along the way, right? So it was out of curiosity, really. Like
Hmm.
I didn't know that it existed. So I've always been in therapy. Like not like for stretches, and then I'll stop for a
Yeah.
while, then something comes up and I go, I need to look at this. So I had a relationship between there was just some family stuff that had come up that was really important. And I was looking at it in relationship to how it was really in a relationship to my inner artist, right? So that's why I did it. And also because it was completely absolutely relative to what happened to me during the rape, the first one, which was I became a possum. That's that fright, it's fawn attached, like
Hmm.
a freeze. And I couldn't protect myself. And I went along with something so that I couldn't believe this thing was happening to me. So
Mm.
I had a complete psychotic break. And
Okay.
but I started looking at how, oh, come on, Bizu, come here. Uppy. Sorry, my dog. um, well, since you're not editing, Bizu, come here. Come here. Uppy. Oh my God, she's just crying, looking the other way. Yeah, I'm gonna come and call you, right? You know it. She's 11 and kind of going a little deaf and blind and anyway, okay, yes, you found me right here. You know exactly where I was. So without getting into too much personal detail, but I
Yeah.
can tell you that I was ready to take a look at my relationship to power and how I shut down when being attacked or, somehow being confronted. And I
Okay.
realized that if I was going to continue doing what I do, I needed to really take a look at that. And
Mm.
I knew exactly where it came from. And the weird thing is that my mother was also 19. She was raped by Russian soldiers in front of her dad, or stepdad, the one who, yeah, at the same age and the same month of that year that I was. When I landed in the hospital, she told me not to tell anybody. She told me it happened to her. I just pull up my bootstraps, even though they're going to send me to a psychiatrist. I wasn't allowed to talk about it or the family. And that was what she told me. Like, you just deal basically with it. And we were just going to move on. Right. So,
Right. So it sounds like
um,
something came up in your life. Like it sounds like it was a work related situation. Was it like a work related or
yeah,
relationship?
it was
You
just
had like
more
a
like
trigger,
no, the
right?
trigger was really watching how the internet started to become, confrontational, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so it was really, yeah,
Okay.
there's certain private things that I'm not willing to share
Oh
that
yeah, for
that
sure. Yeah,
that
no.
went on in my personal life, but also to
Right.
do with yeah, nothing to do with my marriage. That's been awesome. But anyway, just a family
Yeah,
stuff
that's
that came
interesting.
up.
No, I'm
Yeah,
just always curious about because sometimes people I'm also a big believer, and I don't know, like it sounds like you are too. Like, when you get sober, whether it's an AA or you went to a sober retreat or whatever you're using, this is a layered approach, no matter what. So, like,
yeah,
I got sober in AA as well because that's all we had back then. There was no internet, there
yeah,
was no Quit Lit, there was no online meetings, there was none of it. And so that was it. We rehab and AA. So, but now in the last 5 or 7
right. That's
years,
all. Now there's all these amazing
we
tools.
have these what I call modern recovery, which is fabulous. Like I
Yeah.
love Quit Lit. I started to read it. I started to enjoy it and like pull it apart and feel like, wow, what are these women doing? This is amazing, And I'm friends with Jen Couch and she created Sober Sis and in the podcasting world, all of these other incredible women that are writing and talking and doing big things, which is why I like to talk to people like you.
Yeah.
But it is a layered approach, right? So like that recovery program, AA or whatever else, is one part. And I still recommend it because I think that people, especially in the beginning, really need to be surrounded by people who are sober doing sober things,
Yeah.
And so whether you like it or you don't like it, you don't have to like it and you don't have to like all the parts of it. I still recommend it because I think it's helpful in the very beginning. And now some people stick in your lifers like you, and that's wonderful. But then we need to layer on the other things. We need
Oh my,
therapy.
yeah,
We
I
need
will say,
nutrition. We
yeah,
need,
yeah.
spirituality. We need complementary things like acupuncture and massage and
All of which
Reiki,
I do.
right? With
So
all the things.
I
So,
went
like,
back I went back to meetings after not having gone for so long because I needed that social
yeah,
connection and something that I could also do service in that had nothing to do
right.
with my profession. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's
So
what's wonderful about the program too, because you can step in and out anytime. Because we already know as people who've been around a while that that is the medicine that works. Like we know we're never going to leave a meeting and be like, "Oh, that was terrible." You know, it's just not gonna, you're not gonna have that.
yeah,
And so it's wonderful. Yeah. And you can take a break and go back. You can go to meetings when you're out of town. You can go on women's retreats. There's a ton of stuff. But my point is like we never need just one thing. And as the
I
growth
agree.
happens, we need to layer on that treatment. And so I'm always curious what helps people to get, since I'm a mental health professional, like that's my world. I'm so
Yeah,
curious about what helps people to get into that. And usually it's like a relationship. So usually it's a something,
of
right?
course,
Like
of course.
a relationship, or you have a baby, or somebody, you have a loss. There's like these things that go on in life for all of us. All of these things
Right.
happen, and then sometimes they're big triggers, right? Sometimes you have this thing happen and then you're like, oh shoot, I actually didn't really deal with that at the time, or I wasn't really healed
Yeah.
from that, and then it just kind of sends you into treatment, which is a really good thing.
But I never actually was able to connect all the dots. That was the other thing. I was
Mm,
like, oh, I know where this comes from. Because I
mm,
was also dealing a lot of stuff with my parents and doing
yeah,
shadow work. And, so I'm 1,000% with you. For me, 12 steps is the base, and everything else on top of it will
yeah,
help me grow. Like
right.
I needed, that's why I said right off the bat, I needed outside help. It wasn't enough.
Yes.
One of the things late recently, and I'll just bring this up because since it's so everywhere, it's ubiquitous everywhere you see now. And again, what I'm about to say has nothing to do with my opinion on whether this works for people or not, because I'm
Mhm.
sure it does. But like, I've had an eating disorder. Like literally, I still have it. I haven't been bulimic in 30 years, right? So that's been amazing. But I still have I have the 10 pounds, right? Like to 12 pounds. And I'm like, I see myself knowing full well that no, you shouldn't have that, and then I would be doing it. So my doctor suggested, oh, everybody's taking this jab now, the Monjar, all this, right? The GLP-1s.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, I can't, right? This is not okay for me. Like,
Mhm.
yes, I could lose everything in like that. All my friends that went on it like that. But
Mhm.
I know I cannot mess with anything that's going to screw up my dopamine receptors. I
Mhm.
am not, I don't, because if that might shut that down. But I
Yeah.
need to get to that core. So hence I'm looking for a new EMDR person. Ha, 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 ha.
Yes,
Right.
girl.
So I'll become,
Yes,
I was
girl.
like, you literally answered. I'm going, you do? Like this
Yeah.
morning, I was like telling my girlfriend, I really want to get a new EMDR person, but the
You go,
person needs
girl.
to understand recovery.
Yeah. Well,
So I'm
EMDR
calling
is
you.
very magical. Obviously, I
It
wouldn't
is.
I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe in it, that it was
Oh, it
the like number
works.
one treatment for trauma. I get to watch people right in front of my eyes change and heal, and it's the most magical thing in the whole world. So I'm so thankful for that, and frankly, all the neurological approaches.
Yeah.
We're learning the brain research that's been done over the last 10 years has shown us so much about what trauma has done to our brains, and we all have it. I don't care who
Yeah.
you are. If you've been a human on this earth for
Yeah.
any
You've
length of
had,
time, you
you
have
know
it.
what?
And you also mentioned like things like ADHD and stuff, and like I obviously struggle with that as well. I was
I
doing
don't know
great with
how
that.
obvious.
I was doing great with that for many, many years. I think recovery helped a lot with that to
Yeah.
like tone
Well,
that down. And then when I got into my later 40s,
right.
perimenopause started to kick in, and that
Oh, yeah.
exacerbates those symptoms and makes things completely, kind of out of control. And in relation to dopamine and things too, like I think any
Yeah.
one of us, I know myself personally, will find any way that I can to relieve myself, right? Because that is my natural
My
way.
natural
I'm
go-to
not
is
gonna
how can I escape?
yeah, I'm not going to pick up substances. I'm just not going to do that.
No,
But I will go to the
not chocolate.
Chick-fil-A and get a
Yes.
milkshake, and I will do that consistently as soon as I have a feeling, just because I want to have some relief, even though I know, like by a million times in every treatment, every training, every education that I have, that that's not going to help me. So you're so right to nail about all of the other addictions, and like,
They all
even
come together, right?
yeah, they do. And their internet stuff is very real too. Like there's even treatment facilities for that now. It's very scary and
Right.
sad, but it's the same. We're all this, it's the
But I want
same
the freedom.
stuff.
Here's the thing.
Hmm.
I know recovery and recovery communities, right?
Yes.
Where and plus as long as we don't compare ourselves to each other and find a
Yes.
reason to identify, that was really something when I really learned that right from the get-go.
Right.
Don't compare, identify, listen for it as something you can identify with,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'll feel like you belong. And the sense of
Mm-hmm.
belonging that I had with other recovering addicts and alcoholics is spectacular, because I feel like, oh, they get it. They
Yeah.
get me. They understand. I don't have to be ashamed that
It
we're
is
talking about going to
spectacular.
Chick-fil-A.
Oh my gosh, Colette, like I couldn't think of a more profound way to close our time together because that is so true that the sense of belonging, the feeling of being home or we fit
Yeah.
in, there's nothing like being able to walk into a room with recovery people or at least in a room and a space where you know that's a big deal and feel completely at home, you know? I mean, that's truly how it works. And I love your energy and your
Thank
spirit and your zest
you.
for life. And we didn't even get to talk about your book, so we're gonna have another
Next
episode.
time, whenever.
But
It's
I'll
called The
definitely
Art
want
of
to.
Manifesting. There it is, right
Yeah,
here.
the art of, I'll link it below. But I want to make sure we have another conversation because there's so much more for us to even talk about your work, and I'd love to be able to get into that a little more. We'll do like a part two. Um,
Sure.
but for now, where do you like people to get a hold of you if they want
Just
to
my
reach out?
website, ColetteBaronReed.com. And we send so much free stuff. So
Okay.
sign up to my newsletter. It's free, right? You
Okay.
know, there's so many, and it is very much foundational in recovery. But so
Hmm.
anything that I do will suit somebody in recovery. The
Wonderful.
language, you'll recognize yourself in everything that I do. The Art of Manifesting is recent. It's a somatically based, all done by neuroscience way to use doodling as a
Wonderful.
way to help anxiety and to help you co-create the life you want by
Oh,
rehearsing that
I
state
love
of
it.
being in advance. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your
Thank
time,
you.
and I look forward to us coming back together again to have a part two conversation
All
because
right.
this has been
Thanks.
fabulous. And I hope you have a fantastic day.
You
And
too.
thank you so much.